Good morning, everyone. David Green. You see the bios in the book. I don't want to go over it. Consult your intelligence. You could read it. High level, I'm an investment banker. I sell companies. I also help entrepreneurs and business owners grow their companies, either by chasing institutional capital. Certainly, I see a lot. I'm down in Southern California with offices in Los Angeles and San Diego. Great ecosystem to see it. Just very, very similar to here to the Bay Area. I'm also a board member for CLSA. California Life Science Association. Certainly see a lot of companies from angel seed, family, from basically the bar napkin all the way up to public companies. So thank you for joining.
Great. Okay.
So I'm Derek Schapela. I work for Bayer and run a team called Emerging Technologies. It's based in San Jose, but we also have sister teams that are in Shanghai, in Singapore, Tel Aviv, and of course in Germany, given that Bayer is a German company. The role of our team is to look after a broad spectrum of new opportunities to generate revenue. Bayer by now has three main areas. One is in pharmaceuticals, the other one is over-the-counter drugs, and the third one is in crop science. And we cover all these three areas, which means that we have to be very well connected internally to the leadership, to the top execs, but also to the team that do the actual investment, which is a team called LEAPS. And the size of investments that we do is typically rather large, but we also write small checks and do this from the seed round all the way through Series C and so on.
And Michael.
Sure, I'm Michael Tippy. I started my career as a medicinal chemist here at Syntex in the Bay Area. Mark Navler is one of my colleagues who I worked with many moons ago, and we were working on antivirals. Now I'm a seed stage venture capitalist and investor. I cut my teeth with a fellow named Larry Bach, who was very, very successful seed artist. Larry did 22 companies worth over $1 billion today, like Vertex and Aluminum. And I use the same model that Larry used. We go in, when we put our money in as a group, one of us has to go in as the CEO or senior executive in the company, because these are very early stage companies, typically out of university, and run them until we can get to the point where we can reach financeable milestones, recruit the right CEO for the long term, raise a Series A, back out and do it again. So that's our model. Using that model, we've created about 7 companies. And one of those companies is a company called Tomegavax that I ran for several years, coming out of Oregon Health Sciences University. We merged that with Vir Biotechnologies in 2016. Arch Ventures and the Gates Foundation led that round, and Vir did a $2.4 billion IPO in October of this year. So sometimes it works, but there's a whole lot of hard work along the way. And I have this crazy disease where I do these really risky early stage things that nobody else wants to do.
And you're still alive to tell the story.
I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
Not to do it again.
So how many of you in this room are early stage companies? Great. Any investors in here? Okay, good. Anyone random? Not one of those categories?
That would be an investment banker.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. So we know why you're here. You want to know where the money is. So let's just start with sort of the general capital situation. I mean, this has been boom times in the United States in general, but how about in this region? What are we seeing for the early stage companies? Who wants to pick that up on the panel?
Well, it depends on where.
Go ahead. Yeah, depends on where. Go ahead.
Well, we're talking about this here. We're in the West Coast.
The Bay Area?
West Coast.
West Coast, because it's radically different.
Oh,
Seattle and
yeah.
Portland are really, really tough. As my friend who used to run licensing at Oregon Health Sciences will tell you. But here, the Bay Area is the best. Southern California has gotten a lot better in the last 10 years. But a decade ago, it was tough too.
Yeah, I would say if you look at my schedule and use that as a proxy for where investment is, I spent a lot of time in Boston, Cambridge, New York. I certainly spend a lot of time here in the Bay, and then also Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego. And if you look at where money's coming in from the venture firms, it's going into those sectors. There's also some burgeoning ecosystems, life science ecosystems in certain areas, certainly up in the Pacific Northwest, which is great, but also now like Austin, Texas, Denver. And so the venture funds are starting to slowly get into there. But if you look at number one, it's Boston, it's the Bay Area, number two, and then San Diego is kind of 3 or 4. You can certainly throw in Los Angeles in there if you want to call it Southern California. But that's where a lot of the money's going.
Yeah, so generally there's money around, it's just a question of can we get it into our early stage companies? So let's talk a bit about that. When we want to translate out of the university, because this is on your space as it is mine.
That's the hardest.
That's the hardest, okay, talk about that. How would you get these things funded?
It depends on the category. Pharmaceuticals are easier to fund than any other category right now. Devices are really tough. Diagnostics are really tough. With devices, we have kept our companies virtual and running on grants much longer than we expected, because the mantra in the venture community is, there's an oligopoly of acquirers that suppresses acquisition prices. Why should we put $50 million into a device company and get $100 million out when we can put that money into a biotech company and exit $1 billion? That's the conventional wisdom. I don't agree with that, but so as a consequence, we've been going to family offices for device companies, to angel groups, to Chinese investors, and apply for big grants and keep it virtual as long as possible. The pharmaceutical space is different. There is money available, but it is highly variable by region, up and down the West Coast. For example, we shared an office when I was at Norwest Venture Capital with another bold bracket venture firm, and I'll never forget his statement to me. I have companies growing like asparagus within 50 miles of my house in Portola Valley. Move the company to Palo Alto. I'll take a look. Well, as somebody who lived and raised his kids in Seattle, that wasn't interesting to me. So I had to pioneer ways to get around that, and that went through Canada. It went through Europe. Basically, anywhere there was money.
So I have to say, for the device side, it used to be worse, I would even say, than it is now.
Yeah.
And the reason being that companies like ours, but also other pharmaceutical companies, are looking at devices as something that they would like to get around and not do anything in that space.
Sure.
But given that there is an expectation of the patients, of the healthcare providers, to have therapies that use devices in order to complement the drug, there's an expectation to have those kind of devices coming up, and sometimes I would say we are kind of forced to get into that space in order to, for example, provide a solution that is not a drug, can be sometimes a piece of software, can be a device. In women's health, we have seen that quite a bit in hemophilia, in cardiovascular diseases. So there is a little bit better situation regarding the early stage financing of devices. That's what I see as
That's great to hear. There are 20 drug companies in the world. That's it.
Do you have funds? Does Bayer have funds that they might put into?
Bayer has funds to put into that, and as I said in the introduction, the range of funds that we deploy is broad. We just recently did an investment where we acquired basically Blue Rock Therapeutics, but that was initially something where we invested into a joint venture approach and then ultimately acquired it. It's a cell gene therapy. That's another device. It's a bad example from that point of view. But overall, we are looking more and more into how we can provide those combination products. So we develop therapies and drugs that are in development now, where we know that the product's going to have a better patient engagement, it's going to have a better performance if we combine it with either a piece of software and or a device.
How about companion diagnostics? Are you doing more of that too?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Oh,
I see. So when it can range, the functionality can range from identifying the patients, finding the right patients for the right drug. In the oncology space. We see that quite a bit.
Sure.
And then it can also be something where you use the drug, administer the drug, and then have a tool to follow up in order to even adapt the dosage or the regularity of how you administer the drug.
Great.
By means of that, the outcome is better. And as you might know, the FDA recognizes that because there's this criteria of improved quality of life, which helps us to get even the drug or the treatment approved. So there's a motivation also to really do that, right? So it's not just because we want to have a better product. The FDA really has put that in place a few years ago now. So that helps everybody.
Great. That's great news especially for diagnostics companies, because the mantra 10 years ago was, why should we take a big market and turn it into a small market? But things have changed.
Do you have a perspective on this?
My perspective is play out Michael Dirk. I would agree. I think from a pharma standpoint or pharma biotech, so whether that's small molecule or biologic, we're seeing greater interest there for placing bets rather than devices. I would agree with you. It's a little tougher. And frankly, investors want to see traction before they make some investment.
Which means sales a lot of
Which
times,
means sometimes
which
it
is
could
really
mean
hard
sales.
to get from this stage.
It could mean anything from CE mark internationally to having some clinical data on a device that might be a 510K or de novo. Certainly not a PMA, so a long road and very expensive. But traction could mean a lot of things to a number of people, but it could be clinical or bringing in some revenue before they really are interested in it. Also seeing a lot in the healthcare IT space. Right now it's the fastest growing area for investment. And then also on this idea of companion diagnostics, not only is there regulatory tailwinds on that, for example, if we look at like Alzheimer's disease, neurodegeneration, there's a component of companion diagnostics now being incorporated into clinical trials along with the therapeutic. We're also seeing a greater interest there, but healthcare IT is probably your number one area right now for investment. So.
Which is really interesting, since the knock on digital health is there haven't been any big successes in the 7 or 8 years that it's been around. So what do you think is driving the healthcare IT tailwind?
Yeah, and I think it's trying to take a look at the model and connect. There's a lot of disparate solutions out there. They're trying to basically connect what's happening with the physician-patient level and really trying to bring it home and really just try to connect that whole continuum. That's where I see a lot of it. I'm not as excited as an investor or as an investment banker in another wearable. I think it's turning out to be almost a commodity these days. So can you, as an entrepreneur, can you build a solution to identify a problem to connect sort of that disparate continuum of data? There's so much data, we're like data overload, right? How do you connect it all? And then how do you make it actionable? And that's the biggest thing that I see right now. There's not a lot of actionable solutions out there.
Yeah. Just get another feedback from the audience. How many of you are in pharma, I come with biopharma? Okay, devices, diagnostics, digital health. Okay, that's somebody who's in all of it.
Wow, you're truly a Renaissance person.
Yeah. Okay, so if investors aren't really biting at the super early stage thing, then what are the options for our companies?
So we have the last few years, actually since 2013, we have installed an accelerator. Started in Berlin, given that that's one of our key locations for the company. And the way that it works is that startups, most of the time they're seed stage or early stage. Some of them were just being founded. I mean, they had to be founded to be accepted into the program. And they would then join a buyer in the buyer office in the building, basically for 3 months, and run through a program which you find typically in many of these accelerators that you also find in the Bay Area. But I guess the uniqueness of the program, or what back then at least was rather unique, is that you basically were an elevator ride away from all the people that were running these big brands or therapeutic areas. So if you're a company that works on, let's say, a women's health topic, what everybody who works on that and has decision-making power is in that facility. There's about 5,000 people there. So there's a lot of the key players there. And that was the key value add for both sides actually, because it helped us to also get to know the company and the few people that are there, because most of the time about half the company was in our building. We could go for lunch with them and meet them and just go down and chat with them. And at the same time, they got a better feeling of what we actually want and whether there's a good fit. And that then led to either, say, okay, it was a nice time, but maybe not a good fit, or it led to further investment up to a lot of times pilot programs, pilot projects that then help also the company to get, to increase their valuation, quite frankly, and it helped us to better get a better idea of how well they are performing, and then go eventually for more.
Yeah, it's a great model. I mean, you're not the only farmer doing it.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that has a lot of value on both sides. So the question is, how competitive is it to get in, and what do you look for when you are screening these companies?
Yeah, so we it started with a few hundred applications in 2013. Now we do 2 cohorts per year, and we get over 2,000 applications, and we only accept 5 companies in the end. We do define very clearly, and you can go on our website, it's written, there's about 10 categories, and they change for every cohort, because depending on what we are working on, well, we don't want companies to waste their time or our time, to apply for something which is, was probably a good fit 2 years ago, but right now it's just not relevant at the this time. And so then we accept those 5 and really take care of bringing them in. We did have also a sister program here specifically in the US, but we kind of put that on hold. It is quite a challenge to get, once the companies are in, we really want to make sure there's an outcome out of it, right? Because we are spending our time and some money as well, but then making the transition so that there's really a long-term benefit for both sides. That really requires to actually be in Berlin in our main office, and in the US we have, of course, also thousands of people, but let's say the global decision makers and kind of the money and the main R&D is actually still in Germany for our company.
How long can they be there for? Is it 6 months?
It's 3 months. It's a
3
3 months program, and after that, it can go. They might stay there. In some cases, we have that as well. But a lot of times, they actually, when they are successful, they grow up and they kind of even you could say grow out of the space.
Yeah. And the team has to come to Germany for 3 months.
Well, at least some of the team. So usually it would be kind of like the CTO or a CEO, depending what they have and how far they are along. Sometimes it's only 3-4 founders, and all of them just come in and work out of our office. Right?
You're a Skydeck advisor. You want to speak about Skydeck?
Right. So I'm also an advisor and mentor at Berkeley Skydeck, and it's an extraordinarily successful program in my opinion. So I've been through the first cycle of screening companies now last spring, 50 to 100, summaries, business plans, scientific papers that we analyze and then pick a few companies. I got matched with 3 to be advisor to 3 of the companies that were selected last spring, and I've been working with them. One of them was just here in this room, going to meetings, showing to investors, trying to get their pitch ready, really taking people that come out of an academic environment and getting them ready for this grueling exercise of raising funds. I'm about to go through my second selection committee review of 50 to 100 proposals, and we're hoping to get some more out of those. So anybody who's affiliated in some way with UC, the UC system, or or global people that are outside the United States that want to come to Berkeley, but it's a residence program. It's a 6-month period of time, $100,000, and this hive of activity, and it's quite successful.
So you're talking about residents for people from ex-US, not the local. So
well, no, that's so you either have to have a UC affiliation
right.
or be ex-US
Yeah.
and want to come and be in the soup.
Right. So if you have a UC affiliation, there is a fund at Berkeley Skydeck now that if they choose to invest in you, it's, I believe it's 120,000. Is it 100?
Darren, is it 100 or 120? It's 100.
100, okay, $100,000. They take equity in your company in return for the investment, and then you, but you don't have to take it if you don't want it. So most of the teams that I know, and we have teams at Skydeck, we have a team there right now, they've chosen to take the money because they feel that's value add. So in addition to UC Berkeley Skydeck, which takes UC companies as well as other UC, there are many accelerators in the Bay Area. Only some of them are focused on life science, healthcare, specifically IndieBio. And then there are others that, like Skydeck, that are a mixture. So they take tech and they take life science. Everyone seems to want to play in life science. Some of them do it well, some of them not so well. The famous accelerator called Y Combinator has about 25% of its companies in life science. 500 Startups doesn't seem to have very much going on. There's StartX Med, which is Stanford's accelerator. You have to, it's easiest if you have a Stanford affiliation, but they will take some companies that aren't Stanford, and so on. So there are a number, some of our life science companies actually go to LA for the Cedars-Sinai accelerator. You probably know that one, because there's a tight relationship with the hospital. In fact, the hospital management has to decide that they are interested in what you're working on, and then if you get in, you have access to all kinds of people ranging from clinicians to hospital administration and so on. So anyway, there's quite a variety available, and that's something that we're really good at here in the West Coast, is having these options for people. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. And just going back to your original question was, what are the options for entrepreneurs and business owners? We've touched certainly upon the incubator accelerator model. I love it. I think it's probably one of the best ways, capital efficient use of funds to pursue. Really encourage it. Down in Southern California, we have not only the J Labs, which is also J Labs up here, which a lot of people, I think down in San Diego, J Labs, I think they have 56 portfolio companies right now, and growing. There's also a Bio Labs, which is really growing in presence, Evo Nexus, Connect. So I just love that model. There's a mentorship component. It's just a great way of using, precious cash, if you will. But outside of that, I mean, the standard, family and friends route, but I think there's other ways, that certainly non-dilutive that Michael was certainly talking about in his preliminary comments, foundations, and then this kind of growing presence of non-traditional investors, corporate venture capital. I really love that model, in getting him on board early. You just have to figure out what's too early and what's right, and so you really have to try to do your diligence and your homework on identifying the right corporate venture firm.
Yeah.
It's also the angel community, which is really, we're lucky here to have some very sophisticated angel groups. Life science angels, in my opinion, are one of the 2 or 3 most sophisticated groups in the United States. And they do, institutional caliber due diligence. They have serial entrepreneurs. They can syndicate deals. They're well thought of. They can actually raise up to $5 million, I'm told, in syndication these days. So in the last 10 years, the angel groups have really come on and become more sophisticated. And there's also a fairly good feeder effect from some of the incubators you're talking about to the angels. So for the companies at Berkeley Skydeck, for example, I've been talking this week to people from Life Science Angels and other angel groups here in the Bay Area about, will you take a look? I've been mentoring this company for 6 months. I think they're really doing some great things. Will you sponsor them? Because typically you've got to have sort of an advocate in these angel groups to really get traction.
Has anyone in this crowd here been in an accelerator program? Which one were you in?
Well, Europe actually.
Oh, okay.
So it's
Not
part of
local.
me.
Okay, was it a good experience?
Well, on average, so not great, but I have to say I'm in North Italy, there is not so much experience. So it was mainly, let's say, the location where we were sitting that was an incubator, but there was not that much of existence. So we had to, but I probably it's not so representative of the workforce.
Sure. Yeah, anyone else in a local group? Okay, well, it's something to look into. Just before we leave this topic, and I want to pick up on farm in a second, is don't forget there's government grants. So the SBIR grants, Small Business Innovation Research Grants, are a very important initial bolus of non-dilutive financing that companies, early stage companies make use of, and often enough to get them to some milestone where they get interesting to either angels or to an accelerator. So very important.
Yeah, the two device companies in our portfolio, Alignment Ventures, have been exclusively financed by grant money and our money at this point. So, you know, it can be a really great bridge to get to the point where you can attract traditional investors.
Yeah, I've got a diagnostics company in my portfolio that has raised $5 million purely through grants, 11 grants from different agencies and departments of the government. Yeah, I'm very proud of them for having done that.
And don't forget the military. Those are different grants, and it's a Byzantine system, but you can both get an early customer and the development funds in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Great. So let's turn to pharma. This is going to be a good one for Dirk to pick up on. Pharma. I was just at a party last night. There was a pharma party, and people were talking about early stage deals. And I asked everybody, what do you mean by early? And everybody's got a different definition of that. So, Dirk, what's your definition of buyer?
Well, so we have been looking into early stage, and if you can call that early, before even the company got incorporated. So, if that's not early,
It's
well,
early.
that's right. And a lot of times it is actually the model where you work with researchers that want to spin something out of university or the technology transfer office, and so we are looking into those kind of things. The most important thing for us is that there is a fit with what our strategy is and what we are intending to do. If we have a certain therapeutic area, to give you an example right now, oncology is an area that's really important for us. It's actually a strategic business unit. And if you know that space, compared to Roche or Pfizer, Bayer is a much smaller player. So, kind of like started a lot later to enter that space. But given that is something that is strategic for us and that we are much smaller, well, we also need to be more innovative and need to provide something that is smarter or is different, right? And that's where then, the willingness to also take more risk by going into something that is early stage and spending time on that. A lot of times it's not necessarily the money that is the problem or the financing the whole thing, but we have only so many people that can look and collaborate with these players because of course once we engage with them, we want to make sure they are successful, right? And you cannot do this for 100 topics. You can do it only for a few, and therefore the strategic alignment, making sure that it is something that we really want to get into, that is the most important part. And afterwards, the deal and whether it's early stage and at what point in time, or whether we can even leverage, sometimes those grants in the US, or we also have access to a lot of the funds and grants in Europe. But the money side, we always found a solution. It's more the strategic alignment that I found is probably the most difficult. But once that's figured out, the rest usually falls into place.
Do you require a team to be in this company? This company is not incorporated yet, or are you okay with just the founder?
Usually, before we really start to, we require a team.
Yeah. Okay. Who else has a perspective on this?
Pharma.
Pharma. What is pharma looking for?
Phase 2 data. But
any examples of a really early deal in pharma?
Well, I've got a lot of deals, but it changes over time, and with the company and with the fads in the industry. I don't have one off the top of my head. but
Yeah, I mean, I can give one, from an M&A perspective, which is not the norm, looking at a discovery or, even a preclinical deal or pre-IND or IND enabling study stage. They do happen, but not very often. One just last month between Astellas and Zyfor Biosciences, $665 million is really more on a platform. Those are not the norm. But pharma is taking earlier shots on goal. They want to buy today because, if you get that value inflection point, it's going to be almost prohibitively more expensive, right? So they're taking earlier and earlier shots on goal. Yes, it's more risky, but they're really counting on kind of the platform data or the discovery stage data to really kind of drive their decision making. So, but we are seeing that last year they were probably close to 20 deals, M&A deals, for example, buyouts of preclinical or discovery stage companies with some significant, dollars. I mean, but he's talking about Astellas at 665. Amgen did one, maybe on the low end for like 183 for a series of platform of 5 discovery stage molecules. But they're going up to almost $1 billion. It's not the norm, once again. And typically what you're seeing is that kind of that build to buy model or what I call a collaboration to buy model. There's a series of milestones, there's upfronts, and then there's some milestones along the way for development and regulatory milestones. That's typically what we're seeing.
So in other words, you need a collaboration with pharma first, and then they get to know you and like what you do, and you actually deliver what you say you're going to do, and then they say, well, why don't we just buy them? Is that?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is kind of that very, it's almost like a tranche, right? It's that collaboration to buy model. They're getting in bed basically early on, and then, utilizing the expertise of the larger partner to help them develop. And then at some point, when the data is compelling enough, they'll just take them out.
Yeah.
That's what we're seeing.
Good. Let me pause here and see if there are questions from the audience. I'm going to ask these guys questions.
I'll begin with one for Dirk. What is the model for the companies which are brought in? Is there a equity taken, and is there any investment made? Is that a standard amount?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. So for the accelerator, you mean, right?
Right.
Yeah, for the accelerator, we do a very small investment for an option for part of the company, and that it's usually $100,000, and depending on the maturity of the company, there's a one-digit percentage of the company in exchange as an option. So, and it's not forced enough. So, it's open, but I think pretty much all the companies took it so far.
There are questions?
Nobody else has anything, I'll continue asking.
Yes, keep going.
The early stage deals that you have, early stage companies that you looked at, like the ones where it was not even a company, would you mind telling in what situations do you find that compelling? Because that's a very critical area for early stage, trying to spin out. So what sort of companies, technologies would interest you at that stage?
Well, there's a broad range, but let me say this: there's quite a few changes in the company right now that lead to probably 2 buckets where I see early stage companies be relevant. First of all, there are areas where simply we don't have enough experience ourselves or have the know-how in the companies, and a lot of these are in the tech space. So use artificial intelligence to to develop and simulate drugs and identify drug candidates. These kind of areas. Then advanced biomarkers using, for example, medical devices in some cases, using voice, using facial recognition, these kind of technologies where there's a lot of talk around it, and we think it would be highly valuable if it was working. But at the same time, we don't really know how to develop that ourselves. So we really rely on the external partners to do that, and that's where it becomes really interesting even for early stage companies. And the second bucket is that, and I think that's for most pharma companies these days the case, there's more and more external innovation even in the core business of the drug development going on. Meaning this model that also David mentioned, where we kind of like do a joint venture or an early stage deal hoping that if milestones are hit, we can basically then acquire the whole thing or license the whole thing. That is something that's a model that I see more and more also at Bayer, especially in areas where we don't yet have a lot of kind of like existing business, namely in the genomic space, in the microbiome space, CRISPR, cell gene therapies.
Exciting, thank you so much. And may I ask the same question of Skydeck? What type of areas of space?
Well, first of all, I only look at things that save lives, so I don't look at the the broader tech space usually. They're looking for visionary academics, for example, because these are typically university spin-outs. So they're looking for people who have some entrepreneurial pluck. They're looking for people who have a technology that can be translated, and it's not years and years away. So even at in a university accelerator like this, you got to get these companies funded, and you can't fund basic research. It's very, very difficult in a setting where you've got to get investors.
What percent of Skydeck companies get funding at the other end?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think I might.
Do you?
It's sort of in this, in general, I think accelerators are getting about 60 to 70% of companies funded. So not
That's pretty
everybody
good.
gets funded, but, a lot of them do, and it definitely gives you a leg up on not having been in an accelerator. But I want to turn now to venture capital. And how, for the panel, where are VCs playing in this early stage? Do you ever see VCs? What are they looking for? There's a trend to company creation, which is just, okay, we're just going to license some technology and put our own people around it and go use our networks and build a company ourselves, as opposed to a spin-out company funded. So just wondered what
Like
everyone's
Atlas, for
experience is.
example, in Boston.
Yeah, like Bob Nelson at
Yeah.
Arch, and Column Group does this, Third Rock does this, and lots of people who haven't traditionally done this are now playing in this space. I even heard AbbVie tell me yesterday, AbbVie Ventures, that they were doing some company creation themselves.
That's shocking.
So it's really spreading. Anyway, it's just, where do you see the VCs playing early? David?
Yeah, I generally see the VCs getting involved when there's enough compelling data, almost close to certainly having clinical data, but they love obviously having some level of clinical data. So there are certainly some VCs say, it's still, that's too late now. They want, because they want 60, 70% of your company. And if you have clinical data, you're probably outside that range, right? You're probably a little too expensive for them in terms of valuation. So I think at least in taking a look at the data beyond, let's say in vitro data or high throughput screening data, is having some compelling, probably animal data, preclinical data to suggest or at least get an idea of mechanism of action, what you're going to see. That's generally what I see as VCs sort of biting in. They also they prefer NCEs over 505(b)(2)s. They want, they love IP, but they love to get in when the time is right and where they can get it at a very, very low valuation and own the majority of the company. That's typically what I see.
Okay. Who else?
Well, there's a couple of cadres of VCs. They're all homogeneous. First of all, there's the kind of people you're talking about, the Third Rocks, the Atlas, that are doing their own deals. They have teams of people that will, search for the next big thing in academics, and then create a company around that, putting their own people in it. I mean, Third Rock really won't look at many outside deals because they're creating their own deals. So there's a subset of VCs that are doing that. They have big money, lots of dollars to put to work. There's probably not more than a dozen of those in the country, maybe 15, I would say.
Growing.
Right, growing.
It's growing.
But the majority of VCs are still looking at business plans, looking at proposals that are coming in from outside people. And my experience, I've been at a $4 billion, mega fund, Northwest, is that they tend, it's almost inexorable. As you get more money, as you raise larger funds, you have to put more money to work per partner. If you put more money to work per partner, you usually go later stage. So what's happened is there's been a migration from the earlier stages to Series B, Series C rounds. Now, some people have come in, groups have come in to fill that gap, like the family offices and some of the angel groups. But there's been a migration towards the later stage. Now, there's also a countervailing trend because the market is hot, because the public markets are open, because we've had some good exits. There are those who are going back to fill that void that the big VCs have left. So it's a very dynamic situation.
And there's a whole new group of VCs out there that are the micro VCs,
Right.
we call them, that are not the Sand Hill crowd,
Right.
but are investing small funds, and they're all over the place, and it's hard to get a handle on them as a group, except that they're new, and if you just happen to hit it right in something they're interested in, they might come in. So
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about all the VCs who are starting companies out of university technology. What we've seen at UCSF is that some of these VCs will come in and sort of work around our IP, so we're getting no value out of our IP.
Really?
And so we've started a fund, a philanthropic fund called the Invent Fund, where the idea is to fund our faculty inside longer to get them to a better proof of concept point, and then spin the company out so that we can avoid these very early company creation VCs. So that's just a little counter trend here to what's going on out there.
Wow, that doesn't make for good relations with the university. That's going to burn them in the end.
Yeah.
There's a
Sure
question
do.
in the back.
Oh, yeah, question? Yeah. Hi.
So I hear family office thrown around a lot. It seems like this interesting world of people who have money that are interested in investing, but from an entrepreneurial standpoint, how does one meet family offices? It seems some of them, for instance, we're working in epilepsy, which is a very underserved stigmatized disease, and people they say I'm interested in diabetes, I'm interested in autism. Not a lot of people saying, hey, I'm really interested in epilepsy. So any suggestions for companies that are working in less sexy fields to meet people that are family offices that might have a particular interest in that realm?
Well, in my opinion, RESI's pretty good about that.
Yes. Over here.
That's right.
Right, but in general, family offices are very hard they tend to be secretive. Every venture firm has a website. Family offices often don't have a website, and they're hard to get to. Lots of gatekeepers. It's tough. There are some agents that specialize in family offices that crop up, but it's tough in general, in my experience.
Yeah, you generally need a relationship to get in the door. They're very secretive. They don't talk about, they're very philanthropic and more impactful investors than anything. But you almost need that relationship. You also need to know maybe something about the family. Grandma died of cancer or something where there's a connection, and that kind of opens up the door. It's a very difficult area. I find that of all the family offices that are out there, only about 18 to 20% put money into pharma. It's just the time frame is too long. It's too risky. They would rather.
But they do devices.
But they would rather put it into real estate because they know that it's a very defined time frame and that they're going to get money out of it, or they're putting it in some other philanthropic way. But very difficult. So relationships.
So to Michael's point, RESI is the only place that I've seen a bunch of family offices show up. And Chuck Stetson, who is a funder of this conference, has personally tried to assemble family offices in his own conference. So he'd be a good person to meet, Rachel. So later. Okay. Question in the back.
Well, we only have a minute left in the panel, but I wanted to thank you all for being on the panel. It's very interesting to see all of you here. I have one question, really a dual question. We're going to probably go over it by asking this, but it seems to me that I work for RESI, work for life science, but it seems to me in the tech up space, there's a lot of innovation, a lot of companies coming up all over it. And then the question I ask is there enough capital to fund them? I mean, a lot of them have great technologies, great assets,
Well,
you know, that are there. You know.
there is here, there isn't in, Boise. It's very regionally dependent.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, there's a vast amount of capital available, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing is that vast amount continues to drive deal sizes and valuation. And you just got to be almost a little creative in trying to identify that, as well as understand the people who are writing these checks. What is their investment thesis? We're finding some who are wanting, maybe go deeper on their own portfolio to get it to an IPO or some other exit, and rather than putting it into an earlier stage. So you have to really identify and understand, in this case, the check writer. So.
And Bear, do you have capital available? How's your capital situation?
Yeah, we have to.
So if you find the right company.
We
you're
just
not-
announced the deal this morning, so,
Oh, okay.
so
Excellent.
check it out.
So not capital constrained. So to answer that question, for the right deals, there's money, but.
But in general, the earliest money is the hardest to raise. So get over this hurdle and, it'll be easier.
Yeah,
As well as getting the lead investor. That's probably the hardest.
yeah.
Herding cats.
Yeah, it is. Really difficult.
All righty, we're going to leave everybody with a positive message, which is there is capital out there. You just have to know how to go get it. And it's a full-time job. So thank you to my panel.